1963 New Zealand general election took place on November the 30th, 1963, to elect a total of 80 MPs to the 34th Parliament. After defeating Labour and winning the top job for a second time, Prime Minister Keith Holyoake led a government that was seen as pragmatic and centrist, focused on economic management and national development. Holyoake was a skilled politician, well liked for his calm demeanour, and his leadership helped stabilise National after some internal tensions. Although the National Party was generally more conservative than its Labour predecessors, Holyoake's government did not dismantle the welfare state. It continued to support welfare programs through an emphasis on economic responsibility and reducing government expenditure where possible. The government continued to invest in infrastructure, particularly in roads and transportation, to support both economic growth and the agriculture sector. As New Zealand was heavily dependent on agricultural exports, the National Party continued policies aimed at supporting farmers and boosting productivity. The government supported research and development in agriculture along with marketing assistance to enhance exports, particularly to the United Kingdom. Leading up to the 1963 election, the economy was a key issue. Although New Zealand was enjoying post-war prosperity, there were growing concerns about dependence on the British market, rising costs of living, and the need for diversification. Agriculture, the backbone of New Zealand's economy, was facing challenges as Britain, its main export market, was negotiating to join the European Economic Community, threatening the preferential trade terms New Zealand had long relied on. On the world stage, Holyoake was a staunch anti-communist who was concerned with the growing communist influence in the Asia-Pacific region. In 1961, he travelled to the United States and met with President John F. Kennedy, where he found both men were keen on strengthening relations between the two countries. As I stated in my last video, the 1960s were a new era, and in this new era, attitudes were changing. Colonial empires were seen as a thing of the past, and colonialism was now something to be frowned upon. Colonial powers of the United Kingdom, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands had begun granting their many colonies independence since the late 1940s, while in Britain's case they mostly gave up control willingly and focused on maintaining strong relations with their former colonies through the Commonwealth. It was a different story for the likes of France, who lost their colonies through bloody conflict. There was now great pressure on New Zealand to give up control of Samoa, which had been administrated by New Zealand since 1914 after we took it off the Germans. The United Nations had been pressuring New Zealand to grant Samoa independence since the 1940s, but this had been resisted by successive governments. However, sensing that there was a strong mood for independence amongst Samoans and not wanting a repeat of the 1929 Black Saturday massacre, Holyoake agreed to hand over independence to Samoa in 1962. On the topic of people being forced to hand over power, let's talk about the mess that was the Labour Party. Walter Nash surprised everyone when, after Labour's defeat in 1960, he did not resign the Labour leadership and repeatedly told journalists he would lead the Labour Party as long as the Labour Party wants me to lead it. Pressure within the Labour Party membership built up for a leadership change, though Nash was reluctant to stand down and was determined not to be succeeded by Arnold Nordmeyer, Nash's former leadership rival, who he really hated. Nash realised his time was up, so he threw his support behind friend Jerry Skinner to take over. Just as Nash was about to resign the leadership, Jerry just straight up died in April 1962. So Walter decided to remain leader for the 1963 election, with Fred Hackett elected as his new deputy. Labour's membership, including the party's president, were now in open revolt against Nash. After clinching on the job for almost 3 years, in January 1963, Walter Nash announced he would resign and endorsed his deputy Fred Hackett for leader. Only one small problem. Hackett was now terminally ill and ruled himself out, so the following month Nash would be succeeded by his chief rival, Arnold Nordmeyer. Born in 1901, Arnold Nordmeyer was the first leader of the Labour Party to have been born in New Zealand. Nordmeyer was from Otago in the South Island, and before politics he was a Presbyterian minister. During the Great Depression, Nordmeyer witnessed firsthand the effects of the economic downturn on the community and people of the town, which led him to study radical political theory in pursuit of a solution. His strained relationship with Walter Nash is fascinating, as it was a chance encounter with Nash in the 1930s that convinced Nordmeyer to join the Labour Party. In 1935, Nordmeyer was elected to Parliament for the seat of Oamaru. From 1941 to 1947, he was Minister of Health and was the man who created the country's comprehensive National Health Service. He was seen as a likely successor to Peter Fraser. However, he lost Oamaru in the 1949 national landslide. In late 1950, Peter Fraser died, and Nordmeyer was elected in the 1951 by-election for his replacement in the Wellington seat of Brooklyn. In the short period between Fraser's death and Nordmeyer's return to Parliament, Walter Nash had been hastily elected leader of the Labour Party. The speed of Nash's ascent is sometimes seen as evidence that his supporters considered Nordmeyer a threat. Nordmeyer, although he had worked with Nash before, opposed Nash's appointment as he objected to Nash's leadership style and considered Nash to be both autocratic and uninspiring. In 1954, Nordmeyer began a challenge for the leadership. Although he gained considerable backing from certain sections of the party, Nash enjoyed strong union support and defeated the challenge in caucus. When Labour won the 1957 election, Nordmeyer was made Minister of Finance. A short time after taking office, Nordmeyer discovered that the country was on the brink of a balance of payments crisis and decided to take strong measures in response. His first budget, generally known now as the Black Budget, introduced a number of unpopular changes, including significant tax increases. Nordmeyer's idea was a short, sharp, corrective budget would fix the economic situation, and from then on there would be nothing other than improvement until the next election. The crisis was largely averted and the balance of payments situation was resolved favourably. As a result, the taxes were reduced in Nordmeyer's next two budgets. However, this did not quell the unpopularity of his first budget. Following Labour's loss, many blamed Nordmeyer's Black Budget for the defeat, and the general public still had not forgiven him for the increased price of beer and tobacco. Prime Minister Keith Holyoake called the election very late in the year, starting his campaign on November the 4th, not even a month out from polling day. Whilst television had been introduced in New Zealand, the election campaign was a dull affair. However, tragically, the last week of the election would be greatly overshadowed by the assassination of United States President John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, and the winner was Keith Holyoake and the National Party with 45 seats, a loss of 1 and 47.1% of the vote. Arnold Nordmeyer and Labour won 35 seats, a gain of 1 and 43.7% of the vote. The surprise of this election was Social Credit, which won 7.9% of the vote, and its new leader, Vernon Cracknell, came very close to winning the safe national seat of Hobson.